I thought he was crazy when he said that someone, or something, was making him do it. Now I realize that he was saner than I'll ever be. It all started when I was taken in my sleep. I should have just let him kill me. I woke up naked, tied with rope around my arms and legs to a pole in a room that resembled a dungeon. It was dark, but a lamp sitting on the ground in front of me lit the area enough for me to see stone walls, a thick metal door a few feet to my left, and a decapitated head hanging suspended from the ceiling a few inches in front of me. Immediately upon seeing the head, I knew where I was. We had been investigating a serial killer in the area who tortured his victims in satanic ways, such as hanging the heads of people he killed in front of them. This head belonged to a white man, and his face was disheveled with an untrimmed beard and a huge afro. Still fresh blood dripped from the hole where his neck used to be, and one splatter was streaked against the wall behind him. I tried to look around to get a grasp of my surroundings, but the lamp only illuminated so much. Suddenly, the door to my left opened, and a man walked in wearing a brown t-shirt and black shorts. He was bald and fat, but was much shorter than my 6'4" stature. As he came closer, I kept my head down to demonstrate the illusion that he already broken me. I took note that his hazel eyes were watery. He had tears coming down his cheeks, and a sick red covered his face.
"I'm sorry,"
he said, and choked on the words. I could tell that he was feeling real sorrow, so I chose my angle carefully.
"You have to do it, don't you?"
I asked. He nodded.
"Yes."
His tears were flowing more rapidly now.
"Hey, it's okay. I understand." "Really?"
He looked so sad as he approached me, now only inches away.
"Of course,"
I said.
"But could you please get me some socks? My feet hurt and it's cold over here."
To my surprise, he took off his shoes and put his socks on my feet.
"So, how long am I gonna be here before I die?"
I asked. He was sobbing now.
"I'm so sorry. I don't have a choice. She's gonna kill me if I don't." "It's okay,"
I replied.
"Just tell me how long before I die."
He hung his head and stepped back towards the door.
3 days. I'll feed you until then."
With that, he opened the door and left me alone. I smiled when the door closed. I was sloppy in letting someone get the jump on me while I was asleep, but I knew I was winning. Sleep came surprisingly easy that night, but I was awoken early by my assailant coming back inside the dungeon.
"Hey,"
I said weakly, forcing out a cough.
"can I get some water, please?"
Without speaking, he dug a water bottle out of his backpack and placed it in my mouth before leaning it forward. He gave me more water than I thought he would, though, and for a moment I thought he was waterboarding me. I started to cough, and he pulled the bottle back.
"I'm sorry,"
he said.
"I'm alright."
I replied, feigning a few extra coughs.
"I appreciate it.
He nodded.
It's the least I can do. I'm so sorry."
He collapsed to the floor and started crying once again, leaning his head against my ankle. He's breaking, I thought. It's almost time.
"Are you alright?"
I asked.
"It's okay. I understand it's not your fault." "You're You're such a good guy.
He screamed in anguish.
I'm here to start the day 2 ritual. I'm sorry, but it's gonna hurt.
While he spoke, he punched himself in the temple with his left hand. I knew the ritual. He was supposed to cut off my left leg and my right arm. I need to hurry,
Okay.
I said.
Look, can I please get something to eat first? Oh yeah, fuck. Sorry. I'll go get you something.
He reached into his backpack once again and pulled out a McDonald's hamburger. I didn't even attempt to stop the drool from falling right out of my mouth. For a second, I lost track of my goal in anticipation for the burger, and I didn't even think to speak again until he was in the midst of putting pieces of it in my mouth. I coughed to catch his attention, and he stopped feeding me. When he looked up, he was straight-faced and determined. Fuck. Did I miss my chance? I knew time was ticking down, so I thought about going for it right then. But I only had one chance at escape, and I had to get him off balance first. I faked tears as best as I could, and then I begrudgingly spit out the burger and started crying.
What's wrong?
He asked, still unemotional.
Nothing. I just...
I broke into tears once more.
What is it?
He was now letting little sobs catch in his voice. Now or never, I thought with certainty.
I miss my family.
I finished, and before he could break into sobs, I asked,
Could you please let me stand up for a minute? This is starting to hurt.
I used my head to gesture to the rope around my legs. I did miss my family. My wife and I both just turned 30. She was so beautiful. And we had a daughter on the way. He must have been all cried out because he just nodded.
I owe you.
He took out a knife from his back pocket and pointed it at me.
I don't want to hurt you, but I will if I have to.
Checkmate, I thought.
Don't worry, I understand. I just want to feel my legs again.
He was convinced. First, he cut the rope around my arms, then finished with the one around my legs. He began to bring the knife up to point at my chest. But before he could get it past my waist, I kneed him in the stomach with all of my force. Which apparently wasn't much, because he regained from the shock quickly and pushed me back up against the wall. For the first time, I saw a true killer in his eyes.
I thought I could trust you.
He screamed.
Now you have to die early.
I was wobbly on my feet, and I realized I had been drugged, but his anger kept him even more off balance. I dodged his first lunge, and he was sent careening into the wall. I grabbed his extended arm by the elbow and yanked him back towards me, causing him to drop the knife. I held him in a chokehold and brought him to the floor so that we were both sitting. I choked him out until I was sure he wouldn't be putting up a fight for some time. Then I got up and walked over to the butcher knife.
You understand, don't you?
I asked. His response was to look up at me with anger in his eyes. He panted, but said nothing. I smiled.
She's gonna kill me if I don't.
I mocked. I kneeled down beside him and took his head in my arms.
Sorry.
I whispered and slit his throat. I'm not a killer under normal circumstances, but these were anything but normal circumstances. I woke up tied down in a fucking dungeon with some dude's head hanging up in front of me. I was there for almost 2 days, and you know a person would have lost their shit. You could make the argument that I'm not a normal person, though. You see, I used to be a hostage negotiator for the police department in my area. I've been trained for all kinds of fucked up scenarios, including the one where I myself am taken. I never thought that would happen, but apparently I was ready for it anyway. After I killed him, I stripped him of his clothes and put them on. Then I walked up the stairs and through the door. and found that I was in the woods. There were trees all around me as far as I could see, but the hole in the ground that I came out of was in the middle of it all. For roughly 20 feet in all directions, there was nothing but dirt.
How the fuck did he get me out here?
I thought. The sun shined down through the trees, and I chalked it up to a plus that I'd come out during the day. I didn't have a cell phone on me, but I knew that I must have been somewhat close to civilization. There were no living quarters around the area, and my captor had been able to come in and out of somewhere fairly quickly. I started walking. There was no trail, so I simply went through leaves and massive bushes. I had to push branches out of the way every feet, and fatigue was starting to get to me. Flies flew at me in storms as I marched, and I was in the midst of ducking under branches, pushing away leaves, and dodging bushes. Then I realized that as I went further and further into the wilderness, the world around me was growing darker. Night wasn't approaching. Rather, I was coming upon bigger and leafier trees. At first, they gave me a relief from the heat of the sun and the buzzing of the flies, but eventually, they took me into complete darkness. Then I heard it, but I wasn't sure exactly what I was hearing, so I stopped in place and strained to listen harder. Do you ever think you hear something, but you aren't sure if it's your imagination? You stop what you're doing and you listen. It feels more like a vibration than a sound, but you tune your ears and you listen. You might find out what you're hearing, or you might strain for a while and then give up. That's what I did. I gave up. I kept walking, but I was so tired that each step felt strained. I'd been walking for roughly an hour at this point, but I was on the verge of both dehydration and starvation. I began to stumble, and for a moment, I thought about giving up, letting the woods take me. They were beautiful, you know. The woods. Almost too beautiful. I looked up towards the sky. The leaves above me were green in a way that almost seemed to light the wilderness. They had no imperfections. And the giant oak trees weren't menacing. They were magnificent. Some of them were long dead, but they had a certain history about them that made me smile as I sat. I looked around in awe. Divine flowers stared down at me with pure bliss, and I lay down with a smile on my face. Then I realized something that shook me from my defeated yet welcoming trance. I couldn't feel anything. The dirt around me went unnoticed by touch, and I tested the realization by slamming my open hand as hard as I could against a nearby tree. I felt nothing. I slapped myself, but still nothing. The world took on a more ominous feeling at this point. But I was rejuvenated. I wasn't hungry, and I wasn't thirsty. I began to walk once more. After a few minutes, I realized that the sound was back. Drumming and thumping now. It must be a train, I thought. I must be near town. So I took off running. I didn't bother pushing leaves out of the way, but instead only took time to duck under heavy branches and jump over the lower ones. I ran further than I ever thought possible, and I wasn't jogging. I was at a heavy sprint, going as fast as I could. I ran like that for at least an hour. I realize now that there must have been a supernatural presence involved when I noticed that I couldn't hear the sound anymore. I didn't even have to stop to gather my thoughts. I kept sprinting while thinking. It was then I realized that I wasn't even breathing hard. I wasn't tired at all. I forced myself to stop for fear that numbness was preventing me from feeling tired. I don't want to hurt myself, I remember thinking. But still, it was odd that I'd been so destroyed not long before. This was more than a second wind. I sat down again, but truth be told, I felt great. And I wanted nothing more than to keep running. The sound had stopped though, and I was beginning to feel unsure of myself. Leaning up against a tree, I decided to attempt to take a nap. and it didn't take long before I was out. I woke up to the sounds of footsteps coming towards me. They were slow, and they thunked much louder than a human could have managed. Was it a bear? I didn't know, and I don't plan to find out.
Come back tomorrow for part 2.